if you think about any AMMs, they're basically looking at the price on Binance and using that as a reference price to trade against Uniswap pools or any AMM pools. So in a way, they are dependent on price discovery to happen on CeFi before they can actually do anything with it, right? Or do
Right.
arbitrage. So in that point, I'm like, why don't we have these market makers just directly quote an RFQ natively on a dApp? Because it's the same thing. You just bypass one extra step. And the advantage of these things, you don't have to worry about things like front running or MEV because you no longer do pricing on chain. The price is agreed upon off chain, and then the market maker signs it. And then all you do with your smart contracts is execution.
Welcome to Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel, where we explore projects in decentralized finance that are innovating and driving our mission of financial freedom forward. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review Mission DeFi and spread the word by posting a tweet to the show. All opinions expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests are their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Black Knox, Material Indicators, or any other affiliated organizations. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Brad Nickel or his guests as an inducement to make a particular investment, follow a particular strategy, or become involved with any project. A project being featured on the show is not an endorsement of that project in any way. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Now, here's Mission DeFi with Brad Nickel.
I am excited today to have Varun Kumar from a project that I am really fired up about. Talked about it a lot in the last couple of weeks on DeFi Lunch. And that project is HashFlow. Varun is the founder and I would assume the brainchild of the project, the creator of the concept. But he has a team as well, so I'm sure he doesn't want to take all that credit. But Varun, welcome to the show. I really love what you guys are doing at HashFlow, and I can't wait to kind of dive into why you created it and how it works and take it from there. But please tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, thank you so much for having me, Brad. And yeah, I think the founder and chief entertainment officer is a good title. Okay with that.
That's good. I like it. I like it.
So I tend to keep it light. So I think, yeah, about myself, I think interestingly, I have, like I said, founder of HashFlow, but I interestingly don't come from fintech background. I was an aerospace student when I came to the US. I was a Aerospace student. That's what my undergrad is. Everything else, and then I was in the space industry before I got red pilled into getting into crypto. This was in 2016 time. I think it's the same time when you got into it.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Yeah, at that time, I was like, I thought money grows on a farm, so I didn't really know much about anything. And then learned about Ethereum, and then I still don't get it. But then I went down the whole money rabbit hole, and then learned a lot more than I thought I knew I did. Right, and I was like, wait a minute, this is actually this is like the internet of the 1992.
Yeah.
Or even though I was like just born during that time, I was like, okay, I can see like what the internet did to the flow of information. Like crypto is doing that to the idea of money, right? So, and especially to double click on that, the idea is that if you think about money as a technology, then pre-Bitcoin, pre-crypto, you could say that the supermassive governments around the world had a monopoly on this technology, and they got to enforce its use upon you as a user of their fiat network, right? So,
right.
And what crypto did is essentially created this orthogonal framework that cannot be enforced upon anybody, and you as a user has a choice to opt in, right? So basically, it's the fundamental difference between being born into a system versus having the choice to opt in. And I think that was kind of of how what crypto is doing. And I was like, wait, I think I like this. So I want
That's awesome.
And this is where the tectonic shift is about to occur, about to happen. I want to be part of that, that ride. So I think that kind of what me into it.
Let me break real quickly here because you were an aerospace engineer in the German Aerospace Center, right? Audacity and NASA. You deferred your PhD in aeronautics and astronautics at Stanford University because you got so excited about this space. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that. I think at that time it's a more boring story there. I think I just wanted, I just realized I can make more money working in the industry. So I just took an aerospace job. That
Okay, gotcha,
was
gotcha, gotcha.
just
I
continuing the
got you.
PhD.
But you're working in an industry that's
Yeah,
literally blowing up. Like, I mean,
yeah,
everywhere. The entire face
yeah.
of aerospace is
Mhm.
changing dramatically daily.
Correct,
And
correct.
you're working with rockets, kind of the
Mhm.
childhood dream of everyone. And
Yeah,
you're so compelled by the idea behind cryptocurrencies and understanding finally what money is, which I went through the same
yeah.
thing when I was like, oh my God, I've lived this long and I
Mhm.
never really understood money at all, that it compelled you out of that career trajectory for now, at least, into this,
I would say that that is more accurate. I think aerospace industry is quite exciting. Right? I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. I think
right?
which is the reason why I pursued Aerostro, and then I was like, I'm going to go into PhD, and I like space research. But then I think one of the reasons why I got into the startups and just working in the industry, what compelled me was the idea that I felt my contributions would be I would be able to contribute more by
Nice.
working in the industry, and it have
Make a
far
bigger
more impact
impact.
than being in the academia, right? I think that was one of the main reasons why I
That's
chose to be in the
awesome.
industry, and especially being hands-on because I was doing more robotics and building hardware with hand and programming. I think that was a lot more fun. So but I think the limitations in the aerospace industry is like I think hardware is difficult. Like
Yeah.
anytime you build any hardware startup, getting it off the ground is like really challenging. It's expensive, and I think it's like really hard to survive unless you're like SpaceX or you have like government contracts, Lockheed, Boeing, or something like that. Then it's
Yeah.
different. But otherwise, as a private company that builds satellite systems, it's like, and if you don't have any government contracts that give you the edge, it's really difficult to ship hardware and continuously keep doing that. And on the other hand, it's also, I would say, there's a financial incentives where there's some limitation in terms of what you could do there, and which is where I think crypto and software, obviously that presents the opportunities, but then also going beyond that, I think that was at 2016, 17 time was where you could start seeing the corruption more and more openly. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a glitch in the matrix. And I think it's actually more visible now because until now it was more hidden in the plain sight. And now you can literally see, you know, there is powers around the world who like to control the flow of information and use money as a means of social organization to exert their control and achieve policy goals. And if there's one technology that can disrupt that, crypto seems to be that one, right? So I'm like, okay, I think there is a bigger impact to be made in this industry by being in that. And not to mention the barrier to entry in that industry was much easier for me versus in the aerospace because I'm not a US citizen. And as a result, working on anything exciting in US, I can't do it because I don't have the security clearance. And I,
Ah,
so,
interesting.
so, so as a
Interesting.
result, I'm like, okay, well, if my scope here in aerospace is limited, I'm like, okay, fine. And on the other hand, this industry is exciting and I can make a bigger impact by being in it, then I'm like, okay, let me choose that path. At the end of
That's
the day, I think
fantastic.
what's important to me is where can I make the most impact? And I like learning about everything, right? So I'm like less biased towards things. And if I look at grand scale things and seeing where, what's the impact going to be of my work and just in general of the technology itself, I think crypto kind of outweighed aerospace in that sense, even though I still love space and I build my own when I'm free. So it's like one of my hobbies.
Well, that's awesome. Maybe when HashFlow is a huge success, you can take the windfall from that and be able to have a bigger impact in aerospace afterwards. That's maybe
At the very least, I'll go to space. I'll
that's
actually buy
awesome.
that SpaceX ticket and
Nice.
I'll like,
Nice.
Elon Musk take me to space. I'll do that.
That's I love
So
that. And it's interesting because I often when I talk to founders, I ask them, are you a missionary or a mercenary? And what's interesting is I'm getting more and more both, you know. And I love that because I mean, it's impossible to be, I think. I mean, there are people that are full on missionary in this space and all they do is work and build and they don't have any big vision of making or generating wealth. But I love the model of having a big impact, believing in the mission and the vision, and realizing it's money. And and the reality is there's an opportunity here, right? Okay. So are you a developer?
I would say former developer. Right. So when I was writing HashFlow, that I wrote the initial smart contracts. Right. I think some of them are still in production. So yeah. So I was originally a programmer, but then now over time, I do more product and biz development, and I
Uh-huh.
still work with my co-founder and CTO on the system architecture, but he's the one who's taken over the core responsibilities of writing code from me. And I think now I'm more of a I put on a developer hat when I need to, but I'm not primarily a developer anymore.
That's cool. Are you glad?
I don't know. I think on one hand I miss the thrill of writing code or being an engineer, but on the
Right?
other hand, I'm also like learning a lot about just business in general and taking on the product hat. But I think in general, I like to wear different hats, and I like the idea of being able to master every skill and just being able to uh, uh,
Nice.
understand everything about everything. Right. So I think I like doing that. So in that sense, I think I'm quite, you know, I wouldn't say I'm glad or unhappy. I think it's just a new experience. Like
Yeah.
anything is like, I would say it's part of the experience. You learn new things and you keep moving. So at the end of the day, I'm just happy that I'm doing all these things and growing as a person.
That's a great approach. Okay, so let's do this then. Let's get into how HashFlow came about or why HashFlow came about and what it is, and I'll let you figure the order out for that
Mhm.
if you like. But it solves a big problem and has to me has a ton of potential in the space. So I'll let you take it from here with that kind of line of questioning and give me your thoughts.
No, for sure. I think a very simple definition of hash flow is to say decentralized exchange that allows anyone to just connect their wallet and start swapping. You don't need to deposit anything. You don't need to custody your funds. You can just connect your wallet and you can swap across any chains and you can swap any asset class and you don't need to worry about, you know, who you're giving your information to. Right.
Right.
So that's that, that's the top level headline. Now how you say, well, there's so many dexes, right? The hash look cool, but then what about Uniswap? What about sushi? There's so much, there's so many applications out there already who are trying to solve the exact same problem. So what makes it different, right? And what's the secret sauce here, right? So I think I think it's kind of interesting to understand the landscape of how just DEXs or crypto exchanges evolved over time. I think that kind of gives us a perspective on why this is interesting. So so
Cool.
so so if you look at like the early days, like 2016, 17, when the biggest exchange you had was like Coinbase was out there, Kraken was in there, then you had Bitfinex and Poloniex and so on. Or it's
Right.
just like so you basically had centralized entities that would take your money into custody and then they'll allow you to do swaps on the database or trades on the database, right? So
Right.
and that was the norm. It worked really well, and then there was a bunch of hacks that started happening. Mt. Gox being the popular one, and then there was this new rising movement about how do we build a more decentralized trading venue where we don't run into these issues, right? So then Ether Delta was the first ones. There was Shapeshift as well, right? Which I would say it was one of the first decentralized exchanges in that sense. Because Shapeshift allowed you to just trade from your wallet directly.
Right.
Although the UX was a little cumbersome because it was 100% peer to peer. Ether Delta tried to solve a similar problem, but then again, they tried to build order book on chain, which is like where they were hit by the L1 limits, the Ethereum itself. So it was so that's where that struggled. Then I think ZRX came about with the APIs that kind of scaled the idea of anyone being able to offer Ether Delta like products. Uh,
Right.
and I think that's they got some traction. But then really Uniswap happened in 2019, which kind of really got people excited about. the idea of trading against a vending machine, right? So what Uniswap built is a very high performing vending machine that allows anyone to just throw in a bunch of capital in the pool and become a market maker all of a sudden. And then the smart contract will just handle the pricing for you. And it will always give you a quote for eternity as long as Ethereum is alive. And I think, which was a pretty ingenious design in the sense that it actually got people excited about trading, and it kind of changed the way people trade, right? Or interact with the DeFi apps. You can just go simply enter a quote, you'll receive something, and you do a swap. So in many ways, it was like an OTC desk experience, but far more seamless, right? So now, I think that was like a really, really powerful thing to happen in DeFi that really brought the DeFi wave, right? So back, or DeFi summer, you call it. But
it took us from a ghost town of dApps to an explosion. Absolutely.
Exactly. Now, I think that's kind of where I saw the opportunity. I'm like, this is quite interesting. I'm like, if we really have to think more forward thinking in 5 to 10 years from now, and if you're thinking about building a more cap efficient market structure, is this the end all seen of it, or is there room for improvement? Because if you think about Uniswap's design, or just broadly AMM design, like on-chain pricing, it works only if you have lots of capital locked in the pools, right? The moment you don't have as much TVL, the prices suffer significantly, which is also the reason why, if you look at the data, you realize that stablecoin swaps was excellent, right? So is Curve. If you look at ETH/USDC, really good rates. But then if you go to any long tail, despite the fact that anyone can have a market for long tail assets instantly, those markets not necessarily are good markets. Like most of the trade volume for most long tail is on Binance. And the reason for that is because locking that much capital is very capital, it's not feasible for most teams to do. And without that, you can't have good markets, which is a fundamental limitation, right, of AMM model. And not to mention that if you're looking for even like large ticket trades, like slippage or even front running is a big issue with the current scenario, because when you do on-chain pricing, you're basically, what's going on is someone like, like miners and everybody else has information. They get the last look on your trades. And as a result, they can take advantage of that to basically benefit at the expense of the person who's trying to do the swap, right? So what it comes down to, things you see may not be guaranteed, right? Which means it's not the best UX in that sense for someone who's a power trader. And then not to mention that the cap efficiency issue, whereby the LPs are putting capital in the pools may not necessarily actually be winning from doing that, because the way AMMs fundamentally work is they create arbitrage opportunities for takers to trade at the expense of LPs. With an LP, you're basically doing a bad trade.
Exactly. Every time.
Every single time.
It's the dark secret of decentralization and the DEX is that nobody makes money as an LP.
Yes. Well, it's a pretty dark secret, actually, if you ask me there. So I was like, how I'm like, is there a way to fix these things? Can we build a more cap efficient market structure that does a better job at pricing the assets, and also is not as capital intensive, and also from an end user perspective, it just builds a overall better user experience, right? And turns out price discovery already happens on CeFi through market makers who are responsible for pricing these assets to begin with, right? So and not to mention that if you think about any AMMs, they're basically looking at the price on Binance and using that as a reference price to trade against Uniswap pools or any AMM pools. So in a way, they are dependent on price discovery to happen on CeFi before they can actually do anything with it, right? Or do arbitrage. So in that point, I'm like, why don't we have these market makers just directly quote an RFQ natively on a dApp? Because it's the same thing. You just bypass one extra step. And the advantage of these things, you don't have to worry about things like front running or MEV, because you no longer do pricing on chain. The price is agreed upon off chain, and then the market maker signs it. And then all you do with your smart contracts is execution, right? The code already agreed upon by the two parties. So really, the trading experience is far more seamless in that sense. You don't need tons of capital being locked in the pools because market makers can make liquidity available when there is a swap opportunity, but otherwise you can deploy that capital elsewhere, right? And not to mention, it also allows them to price any kind of asset class that is not limited to your spot or ETHUSDC or the blue chips, right?
Right.
And you can go and price things, derivatives or options or ETFs and things like that if they are interested. And that's like a low alpha there because we've been talking to the teams
Nice.
who want to price those and be like, okay, well, this could be interesting to see how we do that.
Very
And
interesting.
or things like, like cross chain, like we launched recently, right? So you can do a seamless cross chain and guarantee the execution rate because again, pricing is agreed upon off chain, and the only thing you do on chain is the two transfer functions and some message passing in between, right? But then
Right.
kind of eliminates all the complexity you typically see with many of the DEX protocols by just going back to simplicity, right? So I think that's kind of where, to summarize, HashFlow, like I said, it's a DEX for layman's language, and more specifically, it's a aggregator, or it's a platform or DeFi native RFQ system that connects market makers to takers, right? And the benefits, like we just described, it just makes for a much better UX, and just makes for a much more capital efficient market structure, right? Going forward. So if I think about AMMs and Uniswap as solving for 0 to 1, and then I think of HashFlow as solving for 1 to N on how do you build a more capital efficient system that scales to onboard the key players into this ecosystem. Right. So that's the slightly longer summary of
No, I
what.
love it. You look, and I mean, from my perspective, I'm very excited
Mhm.
because my company has a large number of people who trade every day on centralized exchanges who are very nervous now about being on centralized exchanges. And I think that, the early efforts with AMMs, the goal was to eliminate humans and
Yeah.
trust, right? But you're not preventing, I mean, you're still eliminating trust with this model. This is still a blockchain-based system. It just so happens that market makers are automating and competing for your business, but they're doing the same thing they do on the centralized exchange. The beauty of that is one of the biggest holes in actually being a trader in DeFi is you're never going to get the price that you wanted,
Yeah.
whether you're trading algorithmically or manually. You're you're basically screwed unless you're just trading Bitcoin and ETH, and even then, it's risky. So from that perspective, I see a tremendous value there. But I think this goes beyond that for than just day traders, experienced traders, whatever. I think it goes to something else in that you mentioned, and that is the user experience for anyone that needs to do a swap. Right? You've got cross chain capability. You've got instant, not instant, but you've got settlement based on the speed of the blockchain or the blockchains that are involved. And you have no concerns about being front run about what you're doing and
Yeah.
ending up paying far more for something than you thought you were going to pay. And so I think that is solving some really fundamental problems. And that's why I was so very excited about this system because it makes total sense to me. So the question I had was, oh, I have a lot of questions, but uh, from the perspective of building this thing, one of the things I would be most concerned about is building this network of market makers. Well, how did you approach that? How did you go about, recruiting and finding people that would be operating as market makers? And then extending on that, what are the benefits to being one? How does it function for them? What's that experience like?
So I would say that was likely the most challenging part, is because building an RFQ system is like, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm also not saying it's not like inventing new mathematics, right?
Right. Right.
So you're basically building a WebSocket API that requests these guys to send you quotes, and
Yeah.
and then you're letting them talk to the takers or counterparties, right? So you basically build a marketplace for them to find buyers and sellers, right? But the question is, how do you bootstrap a DEX, right? And then how do you onboard market makers? So to do that. Uh,
Right.
so in our case, I think one of the strategies we deployed is basically when we raised our funding rounds, we basically got like all the key market makers to become like, investors in the company, right? Kind of aligned and then over time, I think they also became the user. So basically, anyone who's going to be a primary user, we also had them become, part owner of the network, which basically meant like, they had all the skin in the game to partake and help grow the ecosystem, right? So if you look at the cap table, we pretty much had like Jump, Wintermute, GSR, Chronos, Autonomy. And then we also obviously had like Dragonfly, Electric, and then Bolo.GS and all that. But so it was a good combination of people who have been like paramount in the space and who have actually been deeply involved in the space in general, combined with people who have had like lots of trading experience and primarily hedge funds and such, who've been doing this for quite some time. So using that feedback to just build exactly what they want is like probably the easiest. I think the way you think about it is you build based on what the user wants, and then just build it for them, as opposed to having an idea of what you think the user might want, and then only realizing that that is not what they actually want. So it's like, I think that most of our development has been like very, very feedback driven, where we work closely with these hedge funds / market makers, and we just talk to them, figure out what they want, and we use that to fine tune the product, right? So, and that's been our approach, which is very feedback based in terms of like just build, see what else they need, and then use that to deploy the next set of functionalities.
And to get pricing, are you guys using oracles from centralized exchanges to pull those prices? How are you handling that problem?
No, so the market makers issue the quotes, right? So and what's going on is they basically plug into various venues where they're issuing quotes,
On
including
their own back end?
including Binance, Coinbase, and HashFlow happens to be one of the venues where they just plug in. And then what they're doing is they're giving a quote here, and then they're also hedging that across different venues. So overall, they maintain the delta neutral position, but then their pricing is like pretty similar or close to what you would typically see on something like Binance or Coinbase and such, right? So as a result, it's like you don't need an oracle because your market maker is fundamentally an oracle, because they're the ones buying and selling. And if a user doesn't want to trade and they don't like the price, then they basically can decide not to take the quote, right? So if they think it's a bad quote. So because this user has a choice to not trade if they don't like the rates, it kind of makes it the permissionless system, because no one is stopping the user from trading here, not trading here. And if they like the quote, then they just do the swap. Otherwise, they don't, right?
That's awesome.
So that being said, we do pull some data from Pith Network just to compare the rates that market makers give with what the Oracle says. It's just to see how things are, just as an additional security measure to make sure, like, sometimes the quotes are like not something crazy, like, no one is trading ETH at like $1 when it's
Yes. So is this how are you going about picking tokens that are available to trade on the platform?
So we don't pick the tokens. It's up to the market maker to quote anything that they want to price. Like, some market makers, they tend to price lots of the long tail assets, and they're really good at it. Others, they are somewhat more conservative, but then they have pretty good liquidity on the blue chips. So it really, and then others, they don't want to do Ethereum mainnet. They want to do it exclusively on Binance or Polygon and such. So it really depends on the market maker where they want to price. And then some market makers, they want to do options exclusively, so nothing else. So it really depends on what they want to do.
Okay.
But so we don't dictate what assets should be priced. In fact, like, they can price anything they like, and anyone can become a market maker generally to do that.
So from the perspective of somebody becoming a market maker, I'm assuming they would have to have some level of technical infrastructure, some capability to automate, some experience doing this. Are there things that people have to do from a minimum amount that they're capable of handling? I mean, how are people qualifying to become market makers for you after your first round of investors?
So I think once I've seen the volumes come through, like right now, I think we are taking about like anywhere between 8 to 15% of 1inch market share daily.
Nice.
So
Wow.
which is
Wow.
it's if you go on 1inch right now and type ETHUSDC trade, you'll see the route. And Yeah,
That's amazing,
you
dude.
can you can see how much HashFlow is taking there. So
That's amazing.
I think that's kind of where we're getting a good chunk of the volume from, right? So and then once you see that volume, then you can incentivize market makers to be like, hey, we're getting this taker flows to come in and
Yeah,
provide
yeah.
more liquidity, and then you have that flywheel that keeps going. Right?
That's beautiful.
So I think that's the general idea of how it's showing up. But then besides that, there's also, I was going to say, into what's the incentive for market makers? There's a takeoff flow, and they pretty much get to keep all the spreads, and then
Sure.
they're earning rewards on the platform for doing that. But there's a combination of these. And in terms of the profile, what this profile looks like for market makers, I think there's obviously the big funds with massive infrastructure, but we've also seen like individual market makers who are basically their own shop, basically, and they've been like just market making on their own,
Nice.
have their own just no laptop sitting there from where they just issue quotes. So there's a combination. There's like more sophisticated hedge funds, and then there's profiles where it's just a person in the garage just quoting. And I think
But they're not like manually quoting, are they?
no. They
No,
have
okay.
yeah,
I'm
no,
picturing some dude in his garage waiting for quotes.
no. They
Okay.
actually wrote.
Okay. I just wanted
The
to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. Okay.
that is, I wouldn't recommend that.
No, I wouldn't either, but that I was like, well, you never know in this world.
No,
Okay.
it's not that bad yet.
Okay. He's got a little alarm set. Alexa says, "You have a quote, RFQ inbound." It's got to be a lot faster than that, I would
Yeah,
assume.
if Alexa reminds me of RFQ, I'll be very concerned. So,
No, Alexa, he's in the kitchen making dinner. Alexa says, "I need an RFQ on ETH USD," and he's like, "Okay, go." And so gives her the quote. No, I'm kidding. It's ridiculous. Oh, now my Alexa's talking to me. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So this is fascinating to me. Is this something theoretically a user can come in and basically request any coin beyond the ones that you guys have currently listed, just like they can on a regular DEX, right? I can put the smart contract address in, and if there's somebody that wants to take the trade, they can go ahead and trade, right?
no, the market maker must be quoting that asset, right? So otherwise,
Already, they must
yeah,
already be in the system. Okay,
yeah. Otherwise, you won't find a quote for that,
right,
right?
got it.
Yeah, that's
Makes sense. Have you found it difficult to get market makers that are really interested in kind of these long tail trades, or are there folks that just really like that part of it?
so. Right now, we quote the top 20 pairs,
Okay,
or top 20 assets. You can trade them already, right?
right.
And we're working with market makers to increase the depth on those assets. So and my thesis is that if I look at the trade volumes on DEXs at the moment, most of the volume is going through the top 10 to top, even like not even top 10, like it's really stable coins and ETHUSDC and some blue chips. But really
Interesting.
most of the trade volume, even on Uniswap, like, or Curve, is like literally a stable coin DEX. But even if you
Yeah,
look at Uniswap, like nearly like more than 50% of the volume is going through the top blue chips. And the long tail trading volume accounts for like less than 10% of the net volume, or maybe 10 to
uh,
50% perhaps. So which
okay,
is where I'm like, if we do really good job at just pricing the top assets really well, we already can take a good chunk of the market share, right?
yeah,
And then anything beyond that, right? We just need to do the market makers just need to quote tighter than 30 bips, and I think they'll end up winning that market too, right?
that's awesome.
And if you can cover the top 30, top 40 pairs, you're pretty much covering 95% of the market or 98% of the market, right?
Yeah,
So at that point, the assets you cannot price are like Elon coin, or I don't know. I don't know if anyone wants to trade Elon coin right now.
yeah, probably not.
So I think I'm okay with that. Yeah, of not having markets for that. So
That's funny. Nah, the reason I
I
go
like
down
Elon, by
that
the way. I'm just saying
what's
it,
that?
Elon. I like Elon Musk. I just don't know if I'll trade Elon coin. So
I That's okay. I used to like Elon a lot. I think he's losing his mind. And if I were a Tesla stockholder right now, I wouldn't be very happy with him. But yeah, so the reason I have a selfish reason for this. I use a mean reversion trading tool. and and I like to spread those trades out between, a few hundred pairs. And so while it's great to have 20, the more the merrier for me, but with the way you guys are growing and the volume you're growing, I have a feeling it would be more than ample for what I do. So is the platform composable? Is there an API? Is this something that other projects could be connecting to provide the service to their users?
That's correct. So anyone can basically use our Taker APIs and integrate and start taking from our liquidity, right? So we're connected to OneInch, we're connected to Odos, OpenOcean, we're working to add Paraswap. So that there is a bunch, we basically plug it into all the DEX aggregators out there, and the Taker APIs are, anyone can use them to basically plug into liquidity. They can trade both cross chain and just like, single chain liquidity. So it's already available. We're thinking about launching a widget as well that people can just directly add to the application and just start doing a swap. So
Nice.
that'd be interesting. But yeah, so
That's funny.
go on.
I was just talking to a cross chain platform the other, and I said, look, one of the best ways to get to market from a biz dev perspective is to make it easy for protocols to plug this in and have cross chain capability to onboard people into their protocol. And it sounds like that's what you meant by a widget.
Yeah.
Okay. And so are the APIs on your website?
Yeah. If you go to docs, you can
Cool.
find the API docs right away. So you can find docs for both the market makers and for takers, right? You can just use them to plug in.
Beautiful. I'm going to be browsing those because I have something I'm working on that could use it. So that's fantastic. Fees. What are fees like for folks?
We are not charging any fees at the moment, but it is very likely that the DAO, I've seen some proposals already of people discussing, how to add fees and when to add fees. So once that gets turned on, I think, the thing to consider is, how do you add fees and then also make sure that your quotes are still competitive enough that you don't lose out on the volume. But I think we are pretty close to nailing that down because if our spreads are pretty tight, then adding a few bips on top as a fee should not impact or should not make us less competitive, right? So and given that everybody else is charging a lot of fees, right? So I think at the moment there's no fees, but it is very likely that that will change fairly soon, right? So where the protocol itself starts generating revenue.
Nice. So do you have a fairly engaged community at this point? How long have you guys been out?
We've been out for like 11 months now. Like we
Oh,
launched
okay.
sometime like last year in October. That's when things went live. And then now it's like literally over a year, actually, maybe 12 months. Yeah. So that's when it started. It's kind of funny because last year when we launched, we did like 1 million in trade volume a day. And we're
Right.
like, this is it, guys. This,
We've
this
made
is
it.
great. We made it. So
And now you're at 25x that.
I'm like trying to feel like, oh, not high enough. I'm like, we need at least 100. Otherwise, this sucks. What am I doing with my life?
It's not enough.
So
That's beautiful. That's amazing. And is there a token for the project?
yeah, actually, we launched it on November 7th,
Wow.
right before, and the next day, SBF, you know.
Oh, good
So
timing, man.
it was speaking of timing,
Brutal, man. Oh,
but it wasn't that bad though. I think it could have been worse. Right. So we had like the day one launch and we had the listing on Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, and all these other venues.
right.
And we had a pretty good float starting day one. Like there was like nearly 70% of the tokens are out in the market already.
Wow.
It's currently trading at a pretty good volume. So I think overall, I would say the token launch went pretty well. Right. There's
What's the
always
token?
it's the ticker is HFT.
Okay.
It was a pun on high frequency trading. So, but
Ah, that's good. I
it's a
like that.
HashFlow token.
I like that. Well, it seems to me this is a bargain right now for where you guys are. And that is not financial advice. Everyone knows it listens to the show.
It's
I don't
not
own.
financial advice. It's not an investment.
No,
It's a governance token.
there you go.
So I'm not telling anyone to buy because its price is going to go up. So
So
uh,
this would be a great time to get involved in the project.
Anytime is a great time to get involved, right? So I think, I think,
Sorry.
I think, I
Sorry,
think,
I'm not trying to put you on the spot and say something stupid. Sorry about that. I'm not
so
trying to push that.
no. I think generally, like, we're here to build. So anytime
It's a
is
good
a good
time.
time. Exactly.
Yes.
Like, if you're
My
fundamentally a believer in the space, then there is no such thing as a good time.
yeah.
That said, now that most of the speculators are gone, I think generally this is a good time to build in crypto to make a difference. But that said, ah, I'm like, it's never too late.
Yeah. Is there any tie-in to fees with the HFT token? Is there a revenue stream for the governance token?
I think it's at the discretion of the DAO, right? So
Okay.
we haven't defined new rules around that, but the DAO can decide on how and what they want to do with it.
Awesome. Okay. Very cool. Very cool.
Which is also kind of why we, like, when we launched the token, we kept the float high, and most of the distribution is with the community, and the team
Nice.
and investors do not own any. I mean, they're all on a 1-year lock and 4-year vest, which
Nice.
basically means any decision that gets made right now is all happening through the community. Like, they're the ones
Oh, that's beautiful.
doing it, and we are not exactly. Uh, yeah, we're not voting on anything or any of that. So basically, any decision gets made, it's in a completely decentralized way. So
Well, and here's the beauty of your model, right? Like you said at the beginning, most of your recruited investors were people that will be participating as significant market makers in your infrastructure. So convincing them on a 1-year lockup and a 4-year vest is not a difficult thing to do because that for them it's not about token price. For them, it's about a revenue stream from a service that you're providing. And to me, that's that's a really compelling narrative. I'm working with a partner on a project where we're centering things around revenue streams and the functionality of the platform over worrying about a token price, and that's a really compelling narrative, and it's a very compelling narrative that most of the tokens right now, governance tokens, are owned by the community, so the community is actually making the decisions rather than 3 investors. That's fantastic.
yeah, yeah, and I think by slow rolling the vesting on team and investors and letting uh, the float to be high, and let the community own the tokens and figure out things, it just overall helps in the path towards a progressive decentralization, where you start off by making. I mean, obviously the key product decisions are still at the moment the team is working to do those things, but then I think now we get to run a lot more things by the community to see what the sentiment is like around, like, product decisions and what the user feedback looks like and so on. So it's a good way to build from hearing from your users to see what they want to see, and then using that to add things, which is actually a good way to build, because then you're basically building what people want, right? So
That's fantastic. I love that. Love that. You said you mentioned briefly earlier options and some other stuff. Is that stuff that's kind of in the works coming down the line? Are there other features or functionalities that you're capable of talking about that are coming for the platform?
yeah, so I think there's a bunch of things, right? So we just announced cross chain, and right now, I think the key focus is on improving the quotes to improve the rates,
Mm.
right? So and how do you optimize this to just bring in as much liquidity as possible and
Sure.
become the most liquid DEX there is, and then also just this offer rates that no one else can offer, right? So I think that's, like, fundamentally what we've been working to optimize for. But besides that, the hashverse, which is, like, many people have talked about, that's the gamified DAO experience that people can go and have
Oh,
their.
yeah.
Yeah, it says that they can basically play as an NFT character and partake in different activities around the DAO and complete quests and rewards, things like that. That is going to go live very shortly. So I think we're going to phase it out, and we're going to announce how the rollout is going to look like in the upcoming weeks. So that's coming up. Then there's also expansion of chains beyond EVM. So we're looking into SWI and the Move ecosystem more broadly to
Oh,
start.
nice.
So that is something that is in the works. And then we're also looking at different features like adding limit orders or TWAP and things like that at
That was my next question.
the product level, and then maybe even things like CLOB and such, right? So which are something we've been exploring. And then obviously in terms of product, what kind of offerings like options and ETFs something we've been like actively in discussions to figure out
Wow.
how to introduce those, right? So the timing on these and when they're going to launch, I can't speak for it right on this call,
Sure.
but this is what the next year or two of roadmap looks like, right? So
That's fantastic. Is there anything else we should know about HashFlow? And then after that, I have two questions that I always ask everybody that comes on the show.
I think we covered most things. So perhaps we can proceed to the two questions
Sure.
or three questions.
Yeah. So the first one, I think you're really ideally suited to answer. A lot of the folks that I've interviewed, founders that I've interviewed on the show, have had experience with other projects before. And one of my goals with the show is to help founders grow and build and learn how to do things that they may not have done before, like biz dev and positioning and marketing and strategy and overcoming problems with building community, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to answer any of those things to this question though. But you being so coming from another industry into this industry and taking on a project like this, which is a really significant project. The question I like to ask people is, what are the things that you have learned over the last 11 months or the months prior to launch that you either wish you had done differently, someone had given you some advice about building a DeFi protocol and playing in the crypto space and hiring people or whatever it might be that you think would be beneficial or useful for other people coming in to launch protocols in DeFi?
So I think one of the things I would say is don't do things because there's a peer pressure or community pressure or you know or because of euphoria out there. Like
Sure.
like don't commit to things unless it makes sense to you and it actually makes sense from a product perspective. Right. Also, which is one of the things like why we announced the token last year in December because we're like, yes, this is a market, everyone is launching tokens, let's announce that. But then we didn't really end up shipping the tokens in December and January. We like shipped it like this year. So it was almost like a year after it got announced. And in retrospect, we could have just not announced the tokens at all. Right. So,
Right.
so
Right.
and I think that's basically because at that point the pressure became everyone would just keep asking when token you guys promised tokens and you haven't announced it yet or released it yet. And I'm like, yeah. So I think one interesting advice to people would be just do things when they make sense to you, as opposed to falling for the wave, right? So I think that is something that that was one of the big lessons I learned from that, right? And also the other thing would be in terms of what to say, how do you reward the community and so on, and also so when you release tokens, because it's a key thing. Everyone keeps asking when token on many projects. I think do not release tokens unless it's a product market fit. Because if people are not willing to pay to use a service and actually use it anyway because they love it, uh, adding a token is not going to change that, right?
Right.
So the moment you reach a escape velocity at the point where people are using your product because they see a value in it and they're trading it every day, like when we look at the trading and public keys, we consistently see some accounts that just trading and they've been trading on this platform for like nearly a year now. So we're like, well, okay, looks like they are getting a value out of the product itself, and they will continue to do this even if there was no token. And once you reach that, then you can basically use token as a way to complement the usage, right? To incentivize and boots, skyrocket that, and also use that to build community. But then don't just launch token or do anything generally that is based off of peer pressure or what everyone else is saying. Just take your time and it's okay to wait. Like patience
That's
is okay. Patience is actually the key. You don't need to rush things because there's that mindset where you just keep building and test things in production. In this scenario, because you're dealing with lots of money and you have to be extra careful, it's actually okay to take a little extra time, but to ship it and do it the right way, as opposed to just doing it and then YOLOing it and seeing what happens.
That's fantastic advice, man. I think that's brilliant, and I think a lot of people have trouble with that because it is difficult to have people around you. Could be people on the team, could be investors, could be community members, whatever. all telling you that this should be happening now, when in fact your gut or your logical thinking tells you maybe not maybe not yet, right? And so I think that's great advice, is to kind of help people reset and think about whether it's something that's really necessary right now or if it's just other people's desires or incentives,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
That's very well put. Yes.
that's fantastic. Okay, so the last question that I ask everybody that comes on the show is, who's somebody in the DeFi space that you have found, or a project, but it's usually a person that you found to be either inspirational to you or that you think has really been a critical part of kind of building and getting us to where we are, or that you have a ton of respect for?
Oh, I would say there's not one person. There's like three of them. Like there's Balaji, yes,
Nice.
and then Hasib from Dragonfly, and then
Nice.
and Abhichul from Electric. So I think all three have had like they've had like different impact in terms of different stages of the product, but also at a personal level, right? So I learned a lot about everything from biology for like even before I founded Hashflow. It's like, so he's one of the key people who would say like red pilled me into
Nice.
into just understand seeing the world in a from a very different lens than I
Yeah.
used to. And I think it also kind of helped the way I used to think about things. So it really helped me shape my thought process around simplifying things from a product perspective. I think one of the things Balaji is really good at is taking really complex topics and making them really, really simple,
Yeah.
and just kind of boiling out the fundamentals and basics. And I think that kind of framework and how to think about that, I think I learned a lot from him around that, right? And then Hasib, another, okay, brilliant, and also uh, learned a lot in terms of just understanding the incentive design and how you know what are different people's incentives and how they think about this. Because
Right.
anytime I'm not has to have an idea, this is how this could happen, then he'll be like, then he'll be the first person to give me counterpoints on how someone can exploit that and how the other party's incentive could actually potentially cause a different effect than I anticipate. And I think that helped a lot in terms of just thinking through different protocol mechanics, but also generally, I think he's an inspirational person in terms of, if you look at his own story around how he got into the space from poker to giving up poker to doing all these other interesting things. I think he's got a very interesting journey, and I think that's another person I learned a lot from. And then Abhishek, obviously, in terms of just how to think about product and just cutting through the BS and getting to what needs to be done. Right. So I think in general, so those are the three people I would say have had some of the most impact in terms of just me personally, how I think about things, but also on the product directly itself, like, both through investments and just helping me throughout the journey.
That's fantastic. And there's another great piece of advice in that, which is given a lot, but it's that was some concrete examples of it. And that is find investors that will add value to what you're doing, right? You found some folks who not only are, leaders and inspirational in the community, not only could they provide you money, but they can actually give you concrete ways to help build what you're building and grow what you're growing, but also help you see things in a different way. And I think that's all fantastic. Balaji and I have occasional DM debates that occur. I'll make a comment on one of his posts. Sometimes I completely agree with him, and other times I completely disagree with him. But I love following him and listening to him, because exactly what you said. He keeps my mind open to other possibilities. And it makes me think about the things that I think I have opinions about, whether or not I'm correct about them. So I love interacting with him. He's just one of those great human beings. So
Just
that's really cool to hear.
because one of the things I really like and appreciate, I also started like doing that more myself, is the anytime I speak to biology, you would assume that he's opinionated and he's got these opinions and will never change. But turns out he's like the person who the phrase "strong opinions loosely held" applies to him a lot. And I think, and it's a great
Yeah.
thing, because he's like the kind of person that he'll state something, but then provided enough data or counterpoint, he will change his mind. He'll be like, okay, fine, yeah, that makes sense. Right. So and I think that's great, because I think keeping that kind of open mind to the discussion and being able to just look at the numbers and data and being able to change your view to basically move forward is, I think, actually a great way to deal with pretty much anything. Right. So I think that's something I really, really like about him. Right. And I think I start doing it more often.
Yeah, I've started doing more of what he does, which is also really brilliant from preventing escalation of debates. And that is I think if he senses that there are strongly held opinions by someone publicly on Twitter, he likes to take it to a direct message so that there can actually be a discussion. And I have found that to be incredibly refreshing. So no, I think those are all three fantastic. Those are great, Varun. Thank you.
No, absolutely. So my video
Varun,
kind of went off. So I kind of lost you halfway through, but
it's quite all right, man. Don't sweat it. We're all good. It's all about the content, but really appreciate you joining us because I'm very excited about your project and I'm excited about what you're doing. But this was a really enlightening and fantastic interview. So thanks for coming on.
no, absolutely. Thank you, Brad.